and welcome to the new Horizon presented by GE in association with CNBC TV 18 and Moneycontrol. Now, over the course of the next 2 days, we will bring you thought provoking conversations on technology, innovation, and the far reaching impact that it's going to have on sectors such as healthcare, aviation, energy, and cybersecurity. We're going to have speakers cutting across the policy and industry spectrum to give you a sense of the disruption that we are witnessing because of technology. Just to give you a flavor of the kind of speakers we have, we're going to have Bhupender Yadav, who's the union minister. We're also going to have GE CEO Larry Culp, Mahesh Palashikar, Daniel Muffeld, Anupam Sibal, Praveer Sinha, Viren Shetty, and many others really delve into how industries are optimizing technologies, driving insights, and revolutionizing their operations in conversation with anchors from CNBC TV 18 and Moneycontrol. So you're going to see names such as Shireen Ban, Ekta Batra, Rima Tendulkar, Mugdha Warrior, as well as Anu Sharma, driving conversations with some of these leaders. Let's go off to day one then. Well, what do we have for you on day one of the summit? We have an exciting lineup of discussions, a masterclass, a case study, and fireside chats where industry stalwarts will shed light on healthcare and aviation. It gives me great pleasure then to invite our very first speaker for the keynote for this summit. We have Union Minister of Civil Aviation, Ms. Jyotiraditya Sandhya, to deliver the keynote address for the New Horizon.
The Prime Minister, in his early days of taking charge, clearly laid out the path for India's transformation. One of the key pillars on that path was a technology-first model of governance. And so the Digital India revolution began with a view and a vision to use technology to ignite minds, revolutionize processes, service people better. And right from the combination of JAM, which was the combination of the Jana Dhana Yojana, Aadhaar Yojana, Mobile Yojana, using technology as an inclusive multiplier force, providing the same opportunities and platforms to every single Indian. 1.3 billion people from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, from Gujarat to Assam, Arunachal and Manipur. Let me give you some examples of this. For example, the Swamitva Yojana scheme, which uses drone technology to give land titles to millions of people in rural areas. These are large numbers of people that could, in earlier days, not use their capital asset to raise resources. And so, therefore, the aim of the scheme is not only to be able to service people in terms of giving them titles for the land that they own, but also empowering them to surge ahead in their quest for a better life. And similarly, it is technology that has helped us to provide electricity for all through digital metering, ability to cross toll booths in a much more faster, efficient, painless manner, using biometrics to deliver services to the poor, and even vaccinating the world's largest population in the shortest span of time, a record that no other nation, apart from India under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, has achieved. And so therefore our model is not only a technology-first model, but it is a people-first model, it is a purpose-driven model. We must also endeavor to continue to excel by creating world-class products. It's not good enough being first movers, but it has to be a combination of being first movers along with being best movers in being able to deploy this technology for growth-critical industries. The next decade of India's progress, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be driven by the digital investments that we make today. And people say that with AI becoming the norm today, close to about $957 billion worth of potential can be added to India's economy by 2035. Now look at the size of that pie. And therefore, technology not only has its portents in terms of growing economies, but also in terms of holding the key to new science, medical research, and even tackling the world's biggest challenges like the pandemic, the climate change challenge. And therefore, we have to look at substitutes from a climate change perspective for fossil fuels as well. So therefore, for India to take on the role of the technology challenger, there are three tenets that are very important. This technology has to be reliable, it has to be relevant, and it has to be scalable. Relevant to the context of 1.3 billion people, the poorest of the poor. Only then does the multiplier effect come into play. Schemes like JAM, schemes like Swamitva, using drone technologies to move perishables from one corner of the country to the other corner of the country, enhancing value. So the first test is relevance. The second test is scalability. Something niche will not transform lives. It must be able to be scaled up. And along with that, it must also be reliable. Considering the current environment of security threats, having a safe and resilient digital infrastructure is extremely key. And therefore, the quicker we embrace technology, the quicker we make it a part of our lives, it will define in the days to come who we are, what we are capable of, and how we accelerate not only our progress, but I firmly believe the progress of mankind in total. Thank you very much for having me, and I wish the organizers all the very best for this New Horizon Technology Summit. Thank you.
Thank you for that address, Mrs. Scindia. Very inspiring to hear you at the New Horizon Summit. Let's take it then to our next speaker. We have Mr. Mahesh Palashikar, who is the president of GE South Asia, our next speaker to address our viewers, after which CNBC TV 18's Ekta Batra will host a riveting panel discussion on decoding the iron triangle of healthcare: cost, quality, and access.
Honorable Minister, CEOs, industry colleagues, academicians, and guests, I am delighted to speak at the New Horizon event that is exploring the intersection of technology innovations and industrial processes to build a better world for all of us. This is the core of GE. We use technology and data to reimagine industrial process as well as services to make them more efficient, accessible, and sustainable. The intent always is to deliver what the world needs. This discussion is very timely. It comes less than 2 months after the Prime Minister's call from the Red Fort to achieve energy independence for India by 2047. It has been our privilege to be a partner to India in its energy journey since 1902. Today, roughly half of all power in the country flows through one or other GE equipment. We are proud of the deep partnerships in the energy space. Power Grid Corporation, NTPC, BHEL, Tata Power, Adani, Renew Power, Avada, Continuum, and so many more. Now that India has embarked on a transformative journey, to decarbonize its energy sector, we are committed to be a trusted partner and play our role through the most modern GE technologies and innovations to deliver what India needs. As I speak with you, more than 10,000 GE power and renewable energy professionals are helping our energy customers across the country. 11 factories scattered across 5 different states in India are building the most modern power generation equipment for Indian and global customers. We have 5 technology centers in India. The John F. Welch Technology Center in Bangalore is GE's largest integrated multidisciplinary R&D center outside the United States. More than 6,000 technologists and engineers at our technology centers are pushing the boundaries of science to solve the most intractable problems for our customers. They are working on suitability solutions not only for the energy sector but also in the healthcare and aviation sectors. They are working on decarbonization breakthroughs. They are working on improving gas turbines' efficiency in burning clean hydrogen. They are also working on virtualization infrastructure that will make quality healthcare accessible to more people around the world, especially in places that lack qualified medical professionals. We have learned from the current COVID-19 pandemic that technology can help make healthcare available to those who need it the most in a fast and reliable manner. Technology has taken healthcare out of the 4 walls of a hospital. Our tele-ICU solution allows a small number of doctors to monitor a large number of patients in a hospital very effectively. With cloud-based and artificial intelligence technologies, doctors in large city-based hospitals can guide primary healthcare workers to report and advise care to rural patients in a timely manner. What we need urgently is a policy framework that allows such remote patient care and extensive government and private sector partnerships to build the physical infrastructure to deliver that remote care. We also need the ingenuity, creativity, and energy of our health technology startups. At GE, we have been mentoring such startups in India since 2018 with great success. We are excited about our scale-up plans for the 17 startups at our Bangalore Edison Accelerator. The pandemic has made us more accepting of new technologies. In the post-pandemic world, as we bring back productivity and growth, artificial intelligence and machine learning will keep our industrial systems working at their best. Artificial intelligence, data, and algorithms help us carry out predictive maintenance, reduce waste, and cut down carbon emission in a range of areas such as power generation, aviation, healthcare, and most areas of industrial manufacturing. With predictive technology, we can foresee when a boiler might need a change of part weeks before it breaks down. We can foresee when a certain part in the jet engine will need repair or replacement. With technology innovations, we can cut down jet engines emission. Earlier this year, our joint venture with Safran CFM announced a special technology initiative that aims to cut down jet engine fuel consumption and carbon dioxide emission by 20%. This is perhaps the biggest decarbonization effort the aviation industry has seen in its entire history. As the world aims for a healthier, cleaner, and more sustainable future, we are committed to bring the best of GE's technology strengths to build a world that works for all. And our 19,000 GE employees in South Asia are eager and enthused to deliver what the world needs. Thank you.
Well,
Welcome to the panel discussion on cost, quality, and access, decoding the iron triangle of healthcare. This panel discussion will put a spotlight on how technology and innovation can enhance healthcare systems, increase access, and reduce costs, and on how companies can leverage advanced technologies and accelerate innovation to address today's challenges and solve problems of tomorrow. We have an esteemed panel with us this afternoon. I'll start by introducing them. I have Dr. Raghuvanshi of Fortis Healthcare, Dr. Shah of Shalby Hospitals, Viren Shetty of Narayana Health, Dr. Abhinay of Kim's Hospital, Anupam Sibal, the Group Medical Director at Apollo Hospitals, and Shravan Subramaniam, the President and CEO, GE Healthcare, India and South Asia, and Managing Director, Wipro GE. Well, I'm going to start this conversation by allowing Shravan to put this entire conversation into context. Shravan, one of the things that we have seen is a fast track of adoption of technology because of COVID-19. Some estimates are by even 4 to 5 odd years. Give us the context in terms of how technology is changing the way people are accessing healthcare today.
Ekta, thank you so much, and welcome to the other panelists also. You spoke about the triangle, and that is the right context to set for how technology has changed things, especially over the last few months. The triangle is actually quite fungible and constantly moving, right? We talk about cost, we talk about access, and we talk about quality, but this is not rigid. This keeps changing as quality improves, as we have new technology, and then we have new means of accessing this technology also. And the quality bar just keeps getting pushed further and further, and eventually we get into conversations about cost once we're able to scale up and skill up also. Technology has always been around, and different forms of technology have been there as a part of healthcare. But the last 18 months have seen a lot of this being accelerated. I'll give you an example of telehealth. Some of our hospital speakers here have been doing teleradiology and distance health for a number of years, but now it has become the norm thanks to COVID. People have deployed this technology. GE Healthcare has been doing this with tele ICUs, for example. During the recent spike in COVID 2.0, we found that one of the constraints to capacity, or one of the constraints to delivering healthcare to people who needed it the most in far-flung areas, was simply lack of access to trained technologists and trained intensive care specialists. So we utilized some existing technology in terms of our monitoring tools, as well as some telecom solutions, put this together and match this with healthcare service providers, so that maybe one or two specialists were able to provide healthcare and attention, critical care attention, to numerous patients. This is just one example. We've also seen deployment of AI, artificial intelligence tools, in reading CT scans to hasten the diagnosis of a chest CT for COVID. And this application can eventually be applied even to diagnosing cancer. So the point is, technology has been there. This is an opportunity that has brought forward all of these tools and technologies to improve patient lives, improve clinical outcomes, and of course, address access also, Ekta.
Okay. Dr. Raghuvanshi, I want to actually bring that point forward because Shravan did mention teleconsulting. There was a report that I read that teleconsulting went up by around 80 odd percent, but it's come back down to around 20%. So the delta which has been achieved has been around 20% from pre-COVID levels. So is there a sense that maybe technology access will probably revert back to pre-COVID levels, or maybe, we'll see some kind of variation in terms of adopting it simply because of maybe some kind of apprehensions towards it?
Yeah, no, as Shravan said, technology in remote consultation has been around for quite some time. However, the adoption was low, and simply because people felt that certain things cannot be done unless you have an in-person interaction. However, this pandemic has shown that a lot of those interactions which we thought earlier were not possible can be done remotely. My feeling is that some of the tertiary care kind of consultations will probably revert completely to a non-remote manner as it was before. So it will fall back to normal. However, there are many areas where technology and the remote consultation is going to play a major part. And one of those areas which comes to my mind is mental health, which has played, technology has played a very important role during this pandemic phase also. But I think going forward, also that business is not going to shift to a actual mode, and a large percentage of mental health consults will happen virtually. And there are similarly other areas also. I was reading a study from US where it was found that certain areas like women's health, sexual health, mental health, these are the areas which were typically on remote consultations, and they remained so. So I think we will see a similar experience in our settings as well.
Okay, well, I completely take your point about mental health as well as even basic GP consults. I think that already happens a lot in India where you just pick up the phone and call your GP and find out which is the next medicine you can take if you have a normal cold and cough. But nonetheless, that point is definitely taken. Dr. Abhinay, I want to pose that question to you because you do have operations in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. What is your experience been?
So, Ekta, firstly, thank you for having us on the show. So, our experience has been very similar. During pre-COVID, when we were approached doctors to do something on telehealth, it was very difficult for us to even convince them or even talk to them about what the solution we're providing. But unfortunately, thanks to COVID, the numbers surged. So, I think it would have taken us at least 4 to 5 years to get to the numbers that we are currently doing, all because of COVID. So, one problem that got solved is a lot of doctors are now convinced a lot of the care that we're offering today can actually, especially on the consultation front, can actually move online. And it is also more convenient for the doctors. I mean, most of our surgeons currently, they're doing a lot of their follow-up review. They're doing a lot of their follow-up consult online and just focusing on new patients as well as surgical patients. But having said that, this can only be for those patients who have access to a smartphone or access to that kind of a technology. But where we are present in tier 2, tier 3 locations, it's very difficult for us to expect a high volume online consultation. So we've evolved into a hybrid model that will launching soon. And we've seen this work with a lot of state governments in state government initiatives in Andhra Pradesh, where we're looking to create a hybrid model where we partner with the local doctors and create an e-consultation center where they are then able to consult with our doctors in tier 2, tier 3 locations. And if requires an admission, then they don't have to travel to the closest large metro, but they can go to a tier 2, tier 3 hospital that is being operated by us. So there are multiple modes that we are now looking to and evaluating. So we're hopeful that we'll get onto the journey and take this forward.
Okay. What has your experience been, Dr. Shah, with regards to teleconsulting? Because it probably applies to certain aspects. We did mention basic GP, mental health, and women's health. But what about more specialist uh, kind of consulting, say, for example, something to do with orthopedics?
Well, about knee replacement or a spine surgery and other things, patients were always traveling because it's a cold surgery and there is no emergency about it. So we never used to have a tele or video consultation before. But of late, in last year or more, we are having increasing numbers of tele and video consultation, and more people, particularly who are in a far-flung place like Seven Sister States or South India or in remote areas of Rajasthan, they want to do video consultation before they come up for the surgery. The second part is, doctors using it. Our tier 2, tier 3 hospitals, doctors, ICCU doctors and other doctors, they are able to use senior doctors of Ahmedabad having their consultation and able to treat patients in a more proper way. So the kind of reluctance which was there before 1 year is no more there, and now more and more doctors are communicating with each other to help each other. And that has made a lot of difference in trusting the technology as well as getting trust of the patient that yes, we are having different opinions and we are treating you in the right way.
Okay. Mr. Sibal, what is your sense in terms of, say, creating this technology in a feasible manner? Because Apollo is looking at an omni-channel kind of route in order to service the patient from start to finish. What is your sense in terms of investments to enable this on a long-term basis?
Hi, Ekta. Thank you for having me on your panel. So our journey when we look at telehealth really started more than 20 years ago. In fact, Mr. Clinton, when he visited in March 2020, inaugurated the first VSAT-enabled telehealth center when he visited Andhra Pradesh. We tried over the last, we have tried over the last 2 decades to really establish telehealth, and through several government schemes, whether it's with Himachal Pradesh in villages in remote areas, or through the government machinery in Andhra Pradesh with urban health centers, or in Jharkhand or in UP, we achieved a fair amount of success. But what COVID did has really been transformative, because what COVID did was establish a connection between doctors and patients at a level that didn't exist. There were programs which were state run, which were using telehealth, but the whole idea of a patient connecting with the doctor of his choice in any part of the country happened because of COVID. And I think we at Apollo, for example, at Apollo 24/7, we've done 2 million consults. And we believe that
But
while the numbers of
but Mr.
teleconsults
Sibal,
will come,
are
sorry.
those 2 million consults increasing? Are they reducing? Are they stabilizing? Because
So what?
that is the key question.
Well, what we're seeing just now is some amount of stabilization when we look at the pan-India picture. But when we look at, what my colleague said in terms of, don't forget that, we have the highest penetration in terms of cell phone connectivity. The connectivity is much better now. So there are a lot of people who are going to access telehealth for the first time because they now recognize that there's potential in that. So we're going to see there will be a slight dip, because there are people who need to see a doctor and they haven't been able to physically travel, and their need requires a physical consult. But we are definitely going to get a lot more first time people who are going to use technology. See, look at the advantages for a patient. See, you have a rheumatological condition, you get blood tests done. The rheumatologist does not need to physically examine you. He's going to quite often just change your medication based on tests. So that can happen while you're sitting in Asansol out of Delhi. Why take a team, spend 2 days, loss of wages, the inconvenience, the money. So we're going to see a lot of that happen. Follow up, post transplants, post, knee replacements, and so on and so forth. But there are conditions in which a physical consultation is essential. So, that's not going to go away. I think India's position as the global hub for medical tourism is also going to be strengthened with the kind of penetration we are seeing. As Shravan said, we had teleradiology that's become much stronger. Digital pathology, which exists in 12 specialties of pathology, and they can really do that sitting in their offices and give an opinion for a very complex, rare case. Tumor boards, multidisciplinary physicians. So, sitting in one hub, you can manage 200 beds. So there have been numerous gains in terms of technology, and many of them are going to get enhanced, refined in the past.
Okay. Viren, is your hospital making active investments when it comes to technology? I'm not only talking about teleconsulting, I'm talking about the entire paradigm of technology to upgrade and to service a new market post-COVID.
The issues with technology in the healthcare sector is this massive barrier to adoption. Now, one of the key reasons we've noticed that teleconsultation has dropped off after the pandemic was that doctors just hated using it. Now we have the largest network coverage in the country, and the patient going, hello, hello, and the doctor saying, I can't hear you, I can't see you. So those are hard challenges to solve, and it's not that to digitize the process means to take the same experience and convert it online. That a lot of the work we're doing on digitization is focusing on the back end, in digitizing all the patient records, in getting doctors more used to the idea that they need to start inputting the data online, in getting patients used to the idea that they need to send their files well in advance of a. So a lot of the work that we're doing on digitization involves just taking our existing processes and working on ways that can be automated, digitized, and improved, so that when we get to that point, we'll be well prepared to make that be a much smoother experience than what it was during the pandemic.
Technology adoption, if it's still, there's still some way to walk when it comes to private hospitals, how far behind is a
what exposure we have and what we have seen in the states that we operate, we have seen a lot of investment that the government and public health has made in the government hospitals. So like Dr. Shah had mentioned, I don't think it's much apparent in the entire support infrastructure on the paramedical side, which is very much important for one to use that technology. So I think investment from a government point of view is not much of a challenge. We have seen them make that kind of is I think where they're struggling to and trying to adapt a little better. So that is what we're seeing as a challenge more than from an investment point of view. So as far as initiatives such as online consultation, I think that they can reach out to the rural health. So I believe at least in Andhra Pradesh, all these online platforms that is run by the government, they do at least 10,000 consultations a day, which is a significant number. So I think there are many people who have come forward. At the day, how does the entire ecosystem come forward to take this initiative forward is very crucial.
Okay, exactly my point, Viren. And those are the statistics. I think we have the ratio is 1:50. Pocket expenditure for an Indian is around 60% when it comes to healthcare or hospitalization. So that point is completely taken. So do you think that there are some initiatives that we can take in order to increase the accessibility when it comes to healthcare?
Innovator or a policy person or anyone in the government ever make the mistake of assuming that this becomes a substitute for the hard work of training millions of doctors and millions of nurses and building all those clinics and infrastructure.
We don't know when that's going to happen. So we have to work with the now and maybe allow technology to help us bridge the gap how much ever we can.
No, absolutely. It won't work that way because, see, you need a level of machine, and this can do very advanced therapies. And you give it to a very tiny nursing home that, as a doctor, who's never used these things, they will never be able to use it adequately. Or if you talk about putting electronic medicine, right? So there is a maturity. There is there are time taken for adoption. There is a huge amount of work that has to involve in improving the process, and that is the hard work. So yes, for extremely well-run, mature institutions like ours, when it comes to their adoption of medical and digital technology. But by and large, the real problem you have to solve first is the supply problem, while looking at ways in which you can enhance the outreach. So in AIMS, for example, you can connect all the doctors and...
Okay. Mr. Sibal, are you in agreement that there has to be a structural change in the Indian medical system before we can even talk?
We need a structural change. I think, at the end of the day, when in 1947, our life expectancy was 35, it's 69 now. So, healthcare, it would be things that we need to do, and the National Health Policy talks about it, that the government spend to go up to 2.5%. We hope that happens soon. Clearly, money needs to be spent in preventive healthcare, enhancing public health infrastructure, because let's face it, 62% of now, how many kids get into medical school every year? 83,000. How many kids actually take the exam? 15 lakhs. So there's a huge interest in medicine. And although 30,000 seats have increased in the last, are going to in the districts going to set up medical schools. Also, don't forget that there are 97,000 doctors of Indian origin who have trained abroad, and they went abroad because they want opportunities in India. So medicine remains a very popular career option, and we need to capitalization those seats. We still have only about 50,000 seats, and we really need to get to a ratio 1:1. In fact, in the US, the ratio of postgraduate seats is more than undergrad. So that's something we need to do. Now, we do have a lot of nurses. You end your career as a charge nurse. You can't become a nurse manager. You can't become a nurse specialist. You can't really specialize. And clearly, there are needs for reforms in nursing. And that's something that hopefully is going to happen. We already have a bill that's technology is going to be central. We're going to see more and more on that. But of course, we need to have the right people to be able to deploy the technology in the right cases, so that we have the right outcome.
Dr. Raghuvanshi, are you in agreement that there are people?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what was said. Human resources is the biggest constraint we have, and that cannot matters. And unless we create that layer of people, and maybe a structural reform is not required, as Anupam said, but I think it requires to be strengthened and do something very seriously about it. A lot of capacity has been enhanced in last 7-8 years for both undergrads as well as postgraduate seats, but a lot more needs to be done.
Okay, absolutely. Shravan, you've been hearing in on adoption of technology from an India standpoint as well as a global standpoint. So what exactly was the biggest adoption that we saw in India probably in the past 1.5 odd years? And what was the biggest adoption that we saw
in the last year and a half, and whether and of course, speaking about COVID, we were completely obsessed about diagnostics at first, and then it became about treatment, then became about vaccination. So something that a procedure, it could be diagnostic, it could be a therapeutic intervention, it could be monitoring. We're seeing technological improvements and enhancements in each one of these. Something that we've recognized as Wipro GE provider with the policymaker, with different technology players. We're also working a lot with startups. So to answer your question, in the recent past, I'm seeing a lot of work being done by startups and being tools that might be, they might have taken some time to come to market perhaps, but COVID kind of pushed this closer to adoption. And you were speaking earlier about cost, and you were talking, and Viren gave a great example about technology. We could drop one of these fancy machines. It could be an MRI or skill to employ these services. So something that we've also seen happening very rapidly, Ekta, and probably the other, and getting more involved and being able to connect the dots. Lastly, I'll leave you with a point on cost that keeps coming up when we talk about all this adoption. Cost, as it relates, absolute, because it's always relative to alternative treatments. It's always relative to the quality of life that you're able to provide. Anupam spoke about the versus another point in your life, and for what therapy and what outcomes. I think this is a question that is worth getting deeper into. And as we upskill the people utilizing this technology, cost also gets defrayed over time.
Abhinay, do you think that would probably see much more in terms of accessibility? There would be more adoption in tier 2, tier 3 cities. And the reason I say this is that the other aspect that we probably need to encourage is manufacturing of.
Absolutely, Ekta. That's a very, very important point. We operate 1,000 beds in tier 2, tier 3 locations. And the cost of the MRI is very similar to what the cost of an MRI in a city. Equipments typically account for almost 30% of the project cost in tier 2, tier 3 locations. And you have another 20% that is accounted by land and building infrastructure. I think where bring down your project cost by 20%, you invest on technology, you invest on infrastructure. But again, technology is so expensive, and you can't have a low-cost MRI, a low-cost cath lab, a low-cost CT. For us to scale much more in tier 2, tier 3 locations. That is where the real rural health cost.
Okay, so Mr. Shah, in order to improve costs as well, is there a possibility of a partnership between public and private healthcare? Maybe are those models which are being considered or already have been considered, and are they feasible in terms of adoption of a greater amount of technology?
Well, there is a definite public-private partnership with Aviation as well as all poor people, and they are able to avail the treatment at the private hospitals. Having said this, the struggle is not only this. Struggle is actually, in 1950s you had got a subspecialist. On the other side, you had nurses, and now also you have nurses. So the gap, and the machines, you have only ECG machine or blood pressure, which are beyond imagination in country like India. Now, the so-called technicians are so poor in running it because they are not even graduates. So the biggest struggle is to run this machine, and they are actually struggling to make us understand, make people understand at the floor level that you need this humidity or minimum this temperature on a continuous basis to keep this machine to run well. So these are basics, and there is a struggle there. So you can create thousands of jobs in this place, not on a technical side. That is what I believe.
Okay. Viren, the point is that India is expected to be around 20, that's what I read, healthcare. Give us a sense. Do you think that we can bridge the gap in terms of investments and eventually bridge the gap vis-a-vis the world when it comes to this gap will probably remain the same or widen?
Well, if you take the big cities, I would say we would be on par with any Western city in the world. But yeah, if you go to the small town, gap that can be bridged. Because what is it that we're talking about when you're talking about the gap in technology, the gap in access, the gap in healthcare? It's manpower. And guess what? We have a huge number of doctors, nurses, technicians for managing this. It's just a question of knowledge transfer, which is basically free. All the syllabus, all the grand total of medical knowledge can be digitized and given to every student. Ivory towers and 500 crore medical college institutions with 30 acres of land to train doctors. To train doctors, you just need cases and someone senior to train you. And we allow the restrictions on training, expanding the pool of doctors and nurses, make India a huge market for healthcare, and then forget about GE Philips and the rest of the world. Indian companies will see such a huge market.
But Mr. Raghuvanshi, your thoughts? Do you think that India obviously has the capability? We have the resources. We have seen how we've managed the COVID-19 first and second wave, which hit us from nowhere as well. Technology in healthcare.
Yeah, in my view, it is the one of the plans which government has of the universal health ID, larger number of people in a seamless manner, and the various components of ecosystem like individual practices of doctors, hospitals. Patient goes for investigation in one lab, then they have to go to another one, and all that wastage will go away. So to reduce the cost, I think that is one single initiative which is going to play a very, very important role. Of course, human resources and to transform how care is delivered in this country.
Okay. Mr. Anupam, what is your sense in terms of what role technology will play in terms of prevention of preventive healthcare as a segment?
Well, I think what we've been doing preventive health checks at Apollo for 38 years. Now that we've digitalized and we've started using AI, and based on our deep dive that we did, we were able to arrive at a non-communicable diseases over a period of time and what intervention would be needed at what point in time to prevent progression. Now that's really, really important because you have a 30-year-old who's lipid. Now it's our duty to make sure that we are able to prevent the damage that would ensue if proper lifestyle changes were not made and medication was not prescribed as indicated. So I think technology is going to play a very central role. You look at diabetes, it's a condition which develop serious kidney problems and neuropathy. And that in many ways can be handled much better if you have a better handle on how you're maintaining your sugars. And it's not just about like lives alone. The control is much lower than in someone in a family where someone's watching. So we started a system where we got a health coach to actually make frequent calls to the patient. And we found that when that individual started to improve, and that again is based on technology, it's based on records over a period of time, it's based on using technology to connect and to follow up and to monitor. So technology is going to be central to prevention. And I think it's extremely important. We will have to control these through better prevention, and technology will be central.
Okay, all right. Thanks very much for that, panelists. So we're going to wrap up this conversation by getting a couple of key points and a couple of key. Don't have the skill set to run it, then the ROI really wouldn't be in anybody's favor at that point in time. And also, this is going to be something which is going to help in terms of preventive healthcare in India as well. And maybe we need to look at indigenous manufacturing of devices.
Yeah, I think technology is going to play a central role. There's nothing denying that. And the government should play a role to create a backbone for technology to play a major part in the delivery of care.
Okay.
Of artificial intelligence, actually, it is going to change whole thing upside down in 3 to 5 years. We will see huge changes in what we are doing with artificial intelligence in preventive treatments.
make an investment, whether it's digital, medical, or any sort of cutting edge technology, we have to ask ourselves, is this going to make the system easier, cheaper, faster, better? And if it
COVID has been an eye opener. I think the scale, the scope, the pace at which we can make innovations, none of us really believed we were capable of. How else can you explain that within days, the genome of the vaccines using novel platforms in weeks, we started trials in months, few months into the pandemic, we had therapy, we had vaccines, and just huge. Who would have visualized that? It would normally take 10 years to develop a vaccine. We still don't have a vaccine for so many conditions, and we will have vaccines for all these conditions in the next few.
Yes, absolutely, Anupam. In fact, that point is taken, but hopefully we don't there's no complacency which really sets in, because yes, this was urgent, but we need vaccines desperately for other diseases as well. But Shravan, I'm going to leave what is your sense in terms of where technology can head? And if we were to have the same conversation 1 year later?
Ekta, let me leave you, and your extended ecosystem is also growing substantially. Wipro GE has been around for 3 decades manufacturing here. We introduced the concept of frugal innovation in India, for India, and even just now during the COVID second wave. Going in the future, with regard to local manufacturing, the local medtech industry, I think we're going to see a lot of tech enablement and potentially, startups and applications have been and will continue to be an exponential enabler in this area.
Okay, all right, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining in. It's been an insightful conversation in terms of technology adoption in India, especially having augmented officer of GE Healthcare, who's joining in on a fireside chat on the other side.
Association with CNBC TV 18 and Moneycontrol. I'm very happy to introduce our speaker for a special fireside on the future of healthcare and how we can reimagine this by leveraging US. Amit, thank you very much for talking to us. The last year, the post-pandemic year, the new normal as we call it, has really been a game changer as far as the healthcare sector is concerned. While it's put systems at stress across the world, adore a huge opportunity in the way we reimagine healthcare services. I was just looking at a very interesting data point shared by the Union Minister for Health in India, Mr. Mansukh Mandavia. He said that the eSanjeevani platform, which is consultations, a number that would have been impossible to imagine even a few years ago, but it's amazing what a crisis can do in making us reimagine how we serve patients, in really accelerating this push. So let me start, Amit, by asking you about the innovation that you've seen. We've seen a lot of crisis, opening insights on how this crisis, how the new normal has really reimagined healthcare delivery.
You're absolutely right, Chandra. Last year in February and March, we were talking to a number of our customers who are healthcare providers across the globe. Model to an extent that they said this change would have normally taken 4 to 5 years to introduce. A number of health systems used to do 10, 15, consultations, telehealth consultations remotely every single day. A very consistent phenomena across the globe. I think this is for the larger good overall, although we should never say that the world should go through what it has gone through, so as to sort of deliver healthcare in future to a much larger population, and really be able to take healthcare where the healthcare delivery is required or where care is required, rather than getting bridges the gap between where the expertise and the resources are and where the patients are. Now, in a nutshell, what has happened here is the hospital has now started going outside of the four walls and virtualized. Now, essentially, what it means is you may be a doctor, you may be an expert doctor sitting in a super specialty hospital in a big city. There may be a patient in a rural setting. Before, there was no other way but for the expertise gap, between where the care is available and where the care needs to be delivered. Now, this is a phenomena that is unlikely to go away post-pandemic. because people are finding that it is extremely beneficial to the payers, be it government or be it individuals or be it insurance companies. They're finding that it is actually a lot more effective to triage patients this way. Therefore, these changes will certainly stay and stick on for a larger good, I would say.
Absolutely. That's a very important point that you mentioned, Amit. Rather than care, you going to the hospitals, you're now getting care at home, work on the way ICUs work. And you said GE has also played a critical role in this. But can you take us through the impact that virtualization can have in delivering healthcare to remote areas that do not have the same healthcare infrastructure as the metros and the big cities? Because it will be solutions can be used here. What innovation or technology can be leveraged to deliver healthcare to remote cities, and what is GE Healthcare doing in this respect? And if you can also take us through the cloud-based systems that you have developed, how is that working out here?
That is happening as a result of that is, you know, irrespective of where the expertise is, we are able to take the expertise where the expertise is actually required. And I think that is a very physician perspective across everywhere, right? It's not just in India. And if we can sort of make sure that that expertise is delivered where the care is actually required, actually available. I'll give you a very simple example. Even here in the US, we see very large health systems now tying up with rural community centers. So before there would be a scanner, and the patient would get scanned, and maybe some radiologist will read that scan, and then the patient will go home or whatever, right? Now we are sending the patient to the community hospital, scan the best possible way, and specifically if there are complicated cases, you need a significant amount of expertise to do the scan correctly. But now because of technology, right, almost as if you're operating the scanner remotely, you can actually do that technologically, not from a regulatory perspective. So the rural hospitals in many cases are getting retired, or semi-retired super hospital, and get the scans done very seamlessly. The second thing that is happening obviously is AI, right? And because of artificial intelligence, you are able to sort of bridge the gap to some extent, especially specifically when it comes to interpreting images, or when it is because of the cloud technologies and the distribution of delivery that happens through the virtualization. You can now sort of dispatch AI, right? So you can say, all right, there's a particular at the location, that the scan was done. You can obviously upload the image on the cloud and so on and so forth. But you can also dispatch AI to the device so that when the scan is done, you can interpret that to diagnose the patient. So we have done, these type of things. ICUs, right? And I think this is critically important, and pandemic has taught a lot what the situation and load is. But the ability to monitor patients in ICUs remotely is very key. And this is this is the genesis of the tele ICU products, right? So we are able to now basically through intensivists who may be working from home because of social distancing reasons and so on and so forth. And I think this has made a huge difference, frankly, because irrespective of the time of the day, irrespective of where the physician is, and even here we are using a lot of data and analytics. If you have 100 patients in the ICU, it's almost impossible to keep a track of everybody simultaneously. And algorithms who are deteriorating or who are in a critical state, and the system prioritizes them so that the clinician can actually focus on the patients who really need help at that point in time. A lot of these give better access, reduce the cost of healthcare, and just make healthcare available for a much larger population going forward.
Right. The other aspect that I wanted to touch upon, Amit, is as healthcare in how different countries can leverage each other's capabilities. Because this is not a service that could have been traded, or there could have been a cross-border exchange of services.
See, look, when you virtualize something, right, distance is not a factor at all. Some of the applications require latencies and performance in terms of where you are and how far you are from the patient, right? And you have probably seen, but here in the United States, very early stages of the pandemic, one of the first regulations and so forth outside of the state boundaries, which was legally not possible before. So, those type of things have already happened. And the beauty of this virtualization technology is that just like you do within a country, from a big city to a small town, you should be able to do that, over any distance for that matter. And I think this is going to be again a big deal because, even operations or, pretty complex surgeries are being done remotely at this point in time. And that technology is going to continue to evolve. So, you can almost think that the word is going to overall outcome and patients in general.
That's an amazing insight, Amit. And people have been talking about this for years, but it really took a pandemic to lead to that accelerated shift where we are talking about a flattened world when it comes to delivery of healthcare, which is such a crucial component. Also help in cutting down wastage that we see in healthcare systems, because there are various estimates from the WHO, from the OECD on how a significant percentage of resources in healthcare systems gets wasted.
See, look, you will be very surprised, and I'm sure that you have seen some data, but when I saw this data first, I was, I couldn't believe it. In the US today, if you say that there is $1 trillion of wastage in the health system in the US alone. And this is where your most advanced systems and advanced technologies at play. In Europe, at this point in time. And there are various reasons for this, right? You mentioned availability of data. Yes, there is tremendous amount of data that is available. In fact, the healthcare is the maximum amount of information, across all the verticals for that matter. The problem is that data is very siloed and it's very fragmented, and it is not curated, it's not effectively utilized at all. And therefore, what's happening is you're actually producing a lot of data, and you're basically pumping that information into the screens of the physician, and information obviously also because of overload of work, right? So data effectively combined together, right, and aggregated and then analyzed can go a long way in reducing 3 to 9% of the time the patient does not turn up for the appointment. And essentially what happens at that time is you have very scarce resources. You're the physician, you're the technicians, you're the nursing staff. Everyone really immediately schedule another patient on the scanner. So, a lot of time goes wasted because of that, and so on and so forth. We have developed, algorithms where based on demographics, based on traffic, fairly accurately predict whether a patient is going to show up for an appointment or not. And based on that, it is very similar to what the airlines do, which is they basically predict how many passengers are going to end up on. And the health systems in the US have done exactly the same thing. So they are able to now use these type of information to minimize waste. But in the pandemic, you saw this very vividly, and unfortunately, right? If that equipment, if that resource is not traceable, and if it is not made available at the right time, it's almost wasted, right? Because you can, based on the patient flow and things like that, you can adjust the resource flow within the hospital very, very effectively, so that things are available. So if you look at an MRI scan, an MRI scan can take anywhere between 7 to 20 minutes to read. You can use AI algorithms now. We have AI algorithms wherein very complex, scans and anatomies can be interpreted. The image can be quantified. That's a huge savings as far as scarce resources is concerned, as well as the radiologist's time is concerned. A lot of repetitive tasks that physicians and radiologists do, almost all of that can be automated today, and that reduces the waste significantly. But more
bring down burnouts among radiologists who you said have to contend with huge amounts of unstructured data, which inevitably never gets used. The other aspect, Amit, that I wanted to talk to you about is the opportunities that you see for collaboration has become a very hot area of investment, of innovation, apart from edtech and agri-tech. At least that's the trend we are seeing in India. So what opportunities do you see here?
There are tremendous opportunities in this space. Precision health and precision medicine. Essentially, what it means is that you have to be very precise and very personal in your ability to diagnose a patient and then be able to treat the patient. And the treatment can be very targeted and very personal of a single organization, be it a company like G Healthcare or other private sector companies or a startup company or even government institutions and so on and so forth. So the entire ecosystem, there is pathology information, there is genomic information, there is radiologic images, CT or MRI or mammo or X-ray. There is social information. We are now, collecting a lot of information together. So if you really look at this, what we've done in G Healthcare is we have a platform for digitization of healthcare and virtualized and distribution of healthcare. We call it the Edison platform. We have opened up that through a program called Edison X in Bangalore, where we are actually onboarding, third-party companies, startup companies, as well as we are working closely with, large. Need the help from the government, to sort of look at it from a regulatory perspective, or really tell us as to where the specific help may be required, so that we can target solutions solving for those challenges. We are doing this across the globe. We have an accelerator in Europe. We have an accelerator in China. We are working with about 20-25 companies, startup companies in the US. So we can very clearly identify patients with specific biomarkers, so that they can actually target the therapies very specifically to the patient condition, but also try and diagnose. This requires a massive ecosystem to come together. And at least from our side, we are trying everything, to bring everybody on the same platform.
Right. I mean, do you believe that if you look at financial services, India seamlessly leapfrogged from a cash economy to a digital payment economy without ever going through the card cycle? Card penetration networks can again play a crucial role in helping India leapfrog and make that leap in healthcare, because we haven't invested so much in systems, but can we make up for it with innovation?
If you want to try to solve the problem in the old sort of regime, right, where virtualization wasn't really taking effect as far as healthcare is concerned, data wasn't being processed effectively. But with all of these things coming together, as you rightly said, right, it's a leapfrog opportunity. You can actually skip multiple intermediate steps and actually bridge the gap very, very quick perspective, right? It, you know, it wouldn't be surprising if India can not only solve its own sort of healthcare constraints, but also be able to help the rest of the globe on the distance and things like that. There is a massive opportunity from a healthcare perspective for the country to start leading this. Because look, we have English speaking population, we have a very strong legal system actively. There is a tremendous amount of data that is available. Okay. There is compute infrastructure, there is connectivity and connectivity infrastructure. So I think all of these can be effectively utilized.
Right, massive opportunity. On that very optimistic note, we come to the end of this fireside chat. Thank you very much, Amit Fadnas, for joining us all the way from the US and really crystal gazing for us the opportunities for India and the world when it comes to reimagining the future of medicine a reality.
On one hand, India is home to some of the best hospitals in the world, contributing to a growing medical tourism sector. But on the other hand, there is an acute shortage of qualified medical professionals, particularly in rural areas, leaving affordability is a big concern. New machine learning and AI technologies could address many of these challenges by improving access to quality healthcare, addressing the uneven ratio of skilled doctors to personalized healthcare at scale. With that introduction, let me welcome you all to CNBC TV 18 and Moneycontrol, New Horizons by GE, AI techniques making precision medicine a reality. My name is Mr. Kumar KV, CIO, CISO at Narayana Health, and Dr. B.S. Ajay Kumar, Executive Chairman, Healthcare Global Enterprises, and I am Reema Tendulkar. Dr. Ajay Kumar, this is a very topical discussion, one which has become increasingly the healthcare sector. What are the kind of technologies? How are we using AI in healthcare?
Yeah.
COVID has been a great, game changer, as we all know. In oncology patients, how are we going to access them? How are they going to access us? And how are we going to handle the treatments for them? And what the learning curve has been amazing, even before, using technology, whether it is telephysics, teleradiology, or telemedicine, tumor boards. So this was only one step ahead of what we were already doing in the COVID. And it was, of course, the fear of COVID, the fear of not getting treatment for cancer, accessibility, travel was banned. How are we going to manage these patients? So that is what we learned in the first. In fact, we did not even have that much of significant drop in the footfall because of the way we managed using technology to the health for treatment. And what was the methodology? When did we do the PCR test? How did we go home and do the test? So we were able to bring down the patient congregation. COVID cases were well handled and we came out of it very well. So all I can say is the COVID period, just to summarize, has really propelled us to a different level. Some of us were already doing physics, study data, but now the acceptance has come. What really the COVID has taught us is acceptance of reality that patients can be treated remotely, managed, but for actual treatment, they may have to come to the hospital. False radiology is going to stay with us, and this is going to enhance the way we treat the patient, rich or poor. In a way, strangely, it brings about equality of treatment. And people don't have to travel, that.
Technology has been a great leveling field. Mr. Kumar and Jani Kumar, there are three issues when it comes to healthcare in India. One is affordability, these challenges.
Sure. So I think one of the things Dr. Ajay already talked about, that previously for every visit you have to go to the hospital. Now you could do a lot through the remote, previously not in the network. Right? So that itself is, it is giving you leverage of the volume, and it reduces the cost, it increases the affordability, and it also the other side from the pharma perspective. Previously, if you look at it, how the demand was generated was through a couple of channels. Now more channels come into the play. There are a lot of sites where the doctor is writing the prescription and it is directly going to e-commerce site, or in some cases directly going to the e-fulfillment sites, or by your payer insurance, it automatically goes. So it gives us better data, better visibility from the pharma perspective, and scale it up in a different way. When you are able to scale things up, COVID times was a issue of the disruption. How do you saw disruption? The injections were not available, the medicines moved. So you have digital control tower where you have demand, you have supply side. You take external data. You also look at it, what is the kind of shipping being done? These reduce the supply chain disruption. And that is definitely, if you have disruption, prices go up, availability is a question. Now that does not happen. So that's the two parts. Within a year, we will be able to bring the medicines, vaccines. But you saw we're using the technology. Many vaccines came within a year, which was as well other area of therapy, because now pharmacy companies themselves believe that using technology, this can be cut down, and even the regulators believe so. And be it in the pharmacy, be it in the healthcare, and that is playing a big, I would say, psychological game and the whole ecosystem.
See, I would like to make a point over here. I think is what has actually, been the tectonic shift, pre and post COVID, right? And what this has actually resulted is the birth of digital health ecosystem and a slew of solutions, or it was much more restricted, right? Because from an infection control standpoint. So the birth of telemedicine solutions and use the application of telemedicine for OP consultations, for thing, right? So you had tele-everything solutions, you had investments in CRM, the customer relationship management, because as patients were moving from a siloed care to collaborating care, and basically from a shift, he or she is properly engaged, right? Investments in electronic medical records, because when you had the pandemic, we were so affectionate to papers, right? We were using papers, tons and tons of reams and reams of papers, digital health data through which insights can actually be made. And then we, our hospital especially, we had solutions on communication and collaboration. So without even a document. So a ton of solutions basically were born during this period, which has basically give a significant boost to the digital healthcare ecosystem.
Medicine, which is taken off in a big way, the rise of automation in the supply chain, the delivery of patient care. And I think that leads me to the next question, is using that data to get the correct insight. Dr. Katie, how was...
Actually, I cannot shudder to think what would have happened if we would not have validated digital pathology before COVID. So, we were very clear, from our MD, CEO, chairman, we were very to get CAP as well as NABL accreditation for digital pathology in this country. And I was at the US CAP presenting my paper on validation of, this when the COVID struck us. As an oncopathologist, I report oncology cases. And there was not a single day in which we were shut because of digital pathology. I mean, we could report from anywhere. Our senior doctors, could have the smart board or the MetroBot, which is, the doctors can use it for prescribing, for sending prescriptions. So whether you talk about sample collection or whether you talk about the processing or whether you talk about cheese, everywhere. And no doctor will be able to really, ensure that the doctor's impact reaches out to the last patient, without technology today. Mantra to it is what is relevant for you, for your setup, for your patients, and that is what it has to be customized for. But definitely, that is what it is.
An oncologist, for us, the data is very important. People have tried various things in the past to collect the right data. And, we have tried, IBM has tried, Watson, so many things have been tried. Particularly in India, the issue always has been curating the appropriate treatment to the next patient who comes in. That has been my challenge. It is not only predictive analysis, it is also molecular diagnostics, genomics, all of that legs up. And India is in a very good position to leapfrog. We have not gone through the several phases of data collection, whereas in US, where I practiced for nearly 28 years, we collect. In India, it is very early stage. But using this kind of, AI, India is very big in technology. And we have a golden opportunity to leapfrog. If we collect data properly, like we're talking about, pharma companies will like to have the data. What is the Indian genomics? How are we treating? We all treat our patients on Caucasian data. We get the outcome. How can we stack this outcome against the Western countries who already have defined outcomes? How do we stand globally? So this is tremendous work to be done, not only data, and AI obviously can help us. There is no question, but it has to be curated the right way. And we have a great opportunity at this time.
A lot of noise which comes through in the data that you're collecting if you do not have the right subsets. So can you tell us how we can overcome this challenge so that we can use the data in the correct way?
At the organization level, of course, the building blocks from the National Digital Health Mission has been clearly laid out. The data policy has been laid out. From an organization standpoint, data are we collecting? Why are we collecting this data? What is the frequency of the data? So in our organization, to give you an example, we have a data sync. We have appointed data officers to monitor the accuracy or the information that we actually collect. And when you basically, then it basically adds a different value because you get data from multiple systems and you can easily make sense. You can then write algorithms and make sense on that. So it is very essential for organs or map out the various sources and ensure that these sources adhere to norms or standards that are prevalent, globally. Once this is actually done, I think half the faster, effective. And if you're able to do that, as adoption rises, you'll be able to collect more data and make sense of it.
Dr. Katie, just getting back to precision healthcare, a topic that we briefly touched upon earlier.
Whether it is, every arm of healthcare actually is taking it up. Now, whether you look at teleradiology era of treatment, right? So there is companion diagnostics, there is evidence-based medicine, there is machine learning, there is deep learning. So today, when any knowledge platform, so we just heard in the news that FDA has just approved the first AI for prostate cancer, right? So that is how things are evolving today, to pregnancy, to anything. So across illness, across wellness, And Metropolis is at the forefront of it all. So, because there is no other way, there is absolutely no other way. If we want to impact the tool, in a very, very effective manner, and that comes by studying your own data. So, one must only trust God and data, nobody else. So, the whole thing is you look at your own data again and again. So, if you're dealing with cancer, with the international figures or with the national figures, you collaborate. You collaborate with other people who are also in good patient care, and you arrive at the correct data. And this data will keep the patient. And what does the patient need? Patient just needs a good health service, at the right time in the right price. But your data and your technology can add to your medicine, and it can give you the
complicated question, and I'm going to keep it. It's going to be an open field, so please feel free to answer. Do you think precision medicine can actually pose a challenge for conventional drug development methodology, because you are addressing a small bit expensive? And if it is going to be expensive, what could be the scope of adoption or the growth for personalized medicine?
See, it is very relative. When you talk about expense, it's very relative, very high. And, it ran into crores. Now, today, the same thing happens in lakhs because many more people have jumped into it. So, as the scope increases, you will see that, the expense or the cost is a relative factor. And this cost is an important cost to factor in your this thing. So, that's all. Over to the others.
We always talk about cost. If you look at historically, particularly in the cancer field today, cancer patients are living much longer globally than they were even 10 years ago, of course, definitely 20 years ago. Of the way we are able to analyze each patient who require what drug, and very specific, targeted treatments are given. Even those who have metastatic disease are living for 5 years. Cancer patients, their treatment, their longevity. As they live longer, they may come back with recurrent disease. Obviously, that will add to the cost. If you look at the human genome sequencing cost, what it was in the past and now, it has come down dramatically. Particularly, the biotechnology costs have come down so much. Today, I can one treatment. I can do complete human sequencing. So this is a phenomenal turnaround. And that is why I said India is in a great position, because we can put together and in a collaborative way. What we lack is collaboration. Each institution wants to do on their own. We don't have collaborative practice, This will catapult us to a different level. And one of the important things will be, like what doctor said, beneficiary will be the patient. I think if we do estimates, 30 to 40% of the treatment given to patients are unnecessary. They're not going to respond. So we can eliminate that. And also targeted treatment can give us. So if we can deliver that the first time, right treatment, wait on the stage, they're going to live longer. And they're not going to come back with a disease. So there are so many. Bring your medical expertise. You are studied in medicine, you are medical and into technology, like, what we talk, telephysics, teleradiology, digital. How, in a matter of minutes will be this kind of genomic driven treatments. And even it is so for non-oncology also, where specificity and good outcome will challenge us. And that is what I think at this.
Bringing down the cost. Anjali, is there something you wanted to add?
Yeah. So if you look at, I'll take an example of shoes. Today, few have personalized shoes available. What does it involve? It involves technology, supply chain, and third, the cost of it. I think there is a lot to go before we say, yes, we are right there where personalized medicines are available and for multiple elements. That's one. You make it, which environment you make it, once you do it, what will be the distribution network of it, and will 3D printing help that, your press. And third comes the cost, which Dr. Kirti talked about. Initially, it will be high for sure. But another factor is also, if you are taking a personalized medicine, might be the quantity will be reduced. So it is very expensive, but as it gets commoditized, it gets scaled up, the technology prices come. So there is a possibility. So I would say we are still few years far from the personalized medicine in true sense.
So we are seeing positive trends, but
Listen, I think the data is very important, right? Today We've just started doing electronic medical records across country. You see initiatives like the National Digital Health Mission. When you talk about collaboration, it will take another 5-10 years for the platform to evolve, for providers to basically connect to this platform. You combine this with the data from pharma side, from genetic, and when you put all this together and apply the right algorithms, then it would actually help us, moving forward on precision. It is all about us into a single large platform, wherein which each persona, a doctor, a surgeon, a business person, an analytic point, all that data will actually help them to make sense. What should be the line of treatment or line of medication? What should be the future course of action? And several other, very important insights that we would be able to give to the patient.
There are a lot of research projects which are currently focusing on predictive models, predicting who's going to get sick before the symptom gets worse. You want to address patient deterioration quickly so you can cut down the hospitalization.
So I would talk about in terms of the predictive analytics work that we have actually done. We basically, I'll give you the illness of the patient, and when he actually checks in and the number of tests he or she actually undergoes, we would be able to dynamically predict the risk factor at various care for the patients. Similarly, another example I would quote is whether patients would require liver interventions in this formula, and predict whether the patient would require liver. By this, what we actually do is we would be able to proactively understand. This has actually helped us in improving the overall reach out to the patients and helping them.
Dr. Ajay Kumar, your thoughts. Is it possible to predict who can, the technologies that we have at our disposal, help in predicting when it comes to cancer?
See, I will begin this by saying that cancer, because it is each time you see a cancer patient, you learn. But having said that, can we predict cancer? For example, the way the technology is moving and undercuts get, why is it others don't? Not all people who chew get oral cancer. So I think this is the issue which has to be addressed. In my view, a lot of it is related to the genomic component. And maybe soon we can tell somebody who wants to smoke whether you're going to get cancer or not. Of course, there is breast cancer. We know BRCA test for breast cancer to say 60% of the breast patients who are BRCA positive, and others. There are areas where we can predict, but this is still at a very early stage. And I think we need to get more and more data. And also key here, we do complete gene sequencing, I think we will get answers to most of these, so-called potential mutations. What we use, there are now actionable mutations which have treatment. But what we don't know which smoker is not going to, like we always know, there are a lot of people who are in their 90s smoke cigars and all, they're doing great. Why are they doing great? Why is somebody whose technology has not come to the rescue? Why is some cancer spread to certain only one organ? Like why is our pathologist friend Dr. Kirti may know why prostate cancer spreads only to bone, mostly to bone, whereas a cervical brain cancer doesn't come to other parts. So I hope AI and technology will be an answer. But one of the venture capital 10 years ago told me in a meeting I'll tell who can have lung cancer. That has not happened yet. So human intervention, everything will be needed. Doctors will be needed, but technology will be a health and also longevity.
Yes, like you said, cancer is an enigma. Yes, Dr. Kirti.
Yeah. So, two very interesting things to what Dr. Ajay said. Let's take CS cervix, right? Carcinoma cervix, most common cancer. And if I go just now and see the HPV indices, it will be really high. But now, as to Dr. Ajay's point, how many of them are actually going to get cervix? Healthy is that lady? How many partners does she have? How long has the infection been there? How is the body hosting an immune response? And then only, if you do a pap smear plus an HPV, you can actually catch it. And there are many of these colorful life women who we have in follow-up, and we are being able to intervene. So it's a mix between technology and human intervention.
And anyway, there has been a lot of conversation about cancer and predictive models. Would you like to add a little more color on the other streams where predictive models, can be of benefit?
There are two parts to it. One, in US, few hospitals are doing is they are looking at patient data and how this when coming back, predicting how likely they will come back within next 15 days. They have done it, and it was a very considerable success they had, almost 80%. How likely they will come back to hospital? Again, they also use the predictive modeling using patient data and sensor data. So some of the I wouldn't name the device, one of the smart devices, and I asked him, "What's your mission?" And he said, "My mission is to reduce the people going to the doctor, to bring that part of it, that as smart devices, smart wearable devices are more adopted, chances of predictability will increase." Now again, doctors will have a very different view, but this is what as a
in achieving an entire digital healthcare ecosystem is data collection. It's currently available in silos, it's available in different formats. You need it standardized, you need collaboration between the different data sources. Dr. Ajay Kumar, are there any
as providers, many of the providers, we haven't, they haven't invested much on the technology front, and the pandemic has, definitely turned the tables. And of data has basically will basically result in, a large amount of money need to be pumped in building these foundational building blocks upon, right? So that actually has to happen as a, from a provider standpoint. From a country standpoint, the implementation of the National Digital Health Mission, the implementation of the registries, the seamless exchange of data, making interoperable, data interoperable across multiple providers will go a long way in improving the overall, health, in terms from a technology standpoint, and the rapid adoption of the digital health mission of the government will actually help us to go a long way.
So what are the investments that
Dr. Kumar said is, see, we have to always think of India as multiple countries within a country. And we have 350 million, maybe 400, which in the technology challenge in digital health or any other way is how do you bridge the gap? One group is moving fast up the ladder, another is slowly trying to catch up. And the economic disparity, urban areas were equal to best of centers in the world. I think this is a unique challenge for our country. And I believe with focused factory approach in technology, it is possible to bridge the gap. Decision makers, everybody has to accept that technology will going to play a major role in bridging this gap, and put certain systems in place for you to do that. Sometimes I think learn from others' mistakes, what they have done, and not to reinvent the wheel, go forward. I think there's a great opportunity for us.
There is clearly a strong case for developing AI-based solutions for healthcare in India. There is an increasing recognition of the importance of intersection of healthcare and AI. We've made progress. We thank our experts who joined in today, Mr. Anjali Kumar, Dr. Kirti Chadda, Dr. B.S. Ajay Kumar, as well as Mr. Kumar. Thank you once again for joining us today.
Care's Edison platform. Joining with me today is Girish Raghavan. We have a pretty large presence for our technology team in India at the tail end of the call for a question and answer. The topic today that we want to talk about is, as an incumbent, GE Healthcare has been, and with radical changes in healthcare and its delivery models that I'll talk a little bit about, what are we doing at GE to build healthcare approach to it, how we are impacting vibrant economies with innovation ecosystem like India. So the key themes, some of the themes I'll highlight are in places like India. So first, in developed markets, as well as in emerging markets all over the world, right? A lot of population is lacking access, largely in emerging markets, to the basic healthcare needs, and we know that. The waste. US spends, for example, about over 17% of its GDP. And in India, we are trying to get to 2.5%. And one critical area is going to be, how do we deliver more care to these 3.8 billion people that lack access. The burnout of doctors, nurses is so common, and this was really tested, right, with the COVID pandemic that we all have been hit with. And in spite of spending all the money, right, in economies like in US, and several of these are human errors, because data not being available to them, it being misrepresented. And we already talked about staff and staff fatigue in the care. The challenges are, suddenly the healthcare system under pressure. There was a lot of virtualization of care that started happening. We started doing calls on WhatsApp and on video phones to try and get basic care rather than go to a hospital where the risk of patient monitoring. Diabetes is a huge comorbidity in India. So can you track patients with high glucose levels and really intervene ahead of time with changes in medication? So rapidly expanding field. And what is really happening is the medicine as it's being practiced, really looking at what is our role to play really in this transformation. We have, as I mentioned, we are one of the established players. We have over 4 million devices in 160 countries. One of the challenges that we are, and a lot of the things about outcomes that I spoke about, that in spite of the spend and sort of advances in technology, the clinicians are still not able to make optimal decisions, clinical decisions for patients, is because of this disaggregation of data. So we see a huge opportunity for a company like GE, get this data in a central unified manner and present it, including the data from EMR and other sources, clinician notes, presented to the clinician, as well as to advanced AI algorithms to make smarter decisions. I'll talk a little bit about intelligent applications, right? Human errors could be mitigated. Those risks could be mitigated by using AI applications either as an adjunct tool to a radiologist or a cardiologist to point him or her to the specific area that needs attention, or in some cases even be efficient. For example, there are companies that are developing AI algorithms today, the number of CT X-ray images and flagging patients who may be at high risk of TB in countries like India. Smart devices is really a very interesting area, right? When you get a CT or MRI scan, a lot of time is spent in positioning you properly on the table, figuring out what scan to the same amount of capital investment. But what if the CT scanner just positioned the patient properly? You just go lay down using camera technology, it positions it well. A protocol is chosen appropriately based on your body weight, your allergies, and GE is innovating very clear about this, that it's not going to all come from within GE. There are going to be multiple startups that are going to contribute to advances in these modern technology areas. So these services that we want to provide, right from AI orchestration to visualization to the 3 different startups to host these algorithms, GE as a central point can come, and using its Edison platform, the platform that we are building for future of healthcare, we could just host these multitude of algorithms on the platform and provide a single point, peace of mind, because we know how to manage life cycle of the applications. Just building on that point a little bit, ecosystem. We can't do this all alone. So our approach with the Edison platform is going to be, can we provide the right tools and right services for different customer segments, right, or different partner segments, like leading universities or for startups? How do we partner with them in this multi-stakeholder ecosystem? And just building on that, we have a very, very active and robust Edison developer program. And Girish, who's with me here, he and his team are actively involved in it. They composed or used to develop applications pretty quickly. The developer ecosystem caters to market-ready third-party developers, as well as regional startups that are earlier stage in many areas, and we would essentially work with them, provide them coaching, mentoring to bring these innovations to market. It's not a quick 1 month journey. We are in a longer term relationship with these companies for multi-year partnership to Edison platform, with this slide that talks about multiple stakeholders. First, for GE and its modalities like CT, MRI, X-ray, the Edison platform is going to be a key vehicle for us to deploy our own software application and bring it to market using the strength of GE. We are there in 160 countries. We have a very high standard and rigor on quality, regulatory framework, life cycle management, their entry into the market. And then the other two constituents, the universities and large healthcare institutions that are key epicenters of innovation. These tools that we can provide, and key thing about digital transformation will be how to bring that knowledge base and clinicians' mind, that workflow, and automate it using modern digital tools. And Edison platform is a great vehicle for that. So with that, and get Girish Raghavan on the call to see if he has any questions that may be relevant to this conversation and the context of India.
So Paritosh, firstly, thanks for the wonderful talk view of healthcare industry as such. So thanks for the wonderful talk. I have a couple of questions, Paritosh, we wanted to talk about here. One is about, in the post-COVID world, platforms play in enabling virtual care and home health kind of technologies in the years ahead.
Thanks, Girish. And look, COVID was a dimensions of our life, right? With mobile phone and consumer electronics, we saw the speed of innovation and adoption as one of the fastest. A bit of question mark resistance in certain markets for patient privacy and data going to cloud and other platforms. To embrace digital innovation to provide things such as virtual care very, very quickly. So the pace of acceleration, really transformation, or sort of applications that were essentially running in hospitals, largely, such as radiologists reading images. How do you do that? The biggest change that I see is large healthcare institutions, are truly partnering now in this digital transformation journey.
If you look at how do you see the next 3 years of healthcare evolving on the cloud? And there have been a lot of questions and concerns in the industry. Address these concerns raised by some of the folks in the industry.
Yeah, no, I think, look, it's an interesting question because right on the spot, right on the time, with minimal amount of time lag, what we call as latency. For example, if you're doing a stenting, having it go to cloud and do analysis and show newly constructed or enhanced images may not advise at the fingertips. I gave you the example of CT scanner positioning itself, right? So it's going to be a hybrid world, if I could tell you the word, if I could use that term. There's going to be AI innovation that edge, very close to the physician, very close to the nurse. And the platform also needs to do it in data center, which is a centralized computational facility in large hospitals. What we hear about in the healthcare world is it's uniquely positioned and developed to do same level of computational innovation on the premise, the use case. And that drives a lot of efficiency in the system, and different customers are ready, as you said, at different points in time to send their data services. So when we send the data to cloud, it goes in without your identifier per se. We can analyze the data, it can come back, and then we'll stitch it together. And as a company, we have to be very conscious of patient ecosystem well.
So Paritosh, the last question we have is something very interesting. What do you think would be the future of medicine as you see? And what are the barriers you think we have to work around to get there?
Yeah, I mean, look, one thing, sources are not going to scale. So we have to do it more efficiently in a more automated way. And what better tools are there than digital technology to drive that? So you will see, decision guidance more effective, so they can see 10 patients in 3 hours instead of 5 patients in 3 hours, right? Because they're taking less time in making those clinical decisions. Algorithmic triage that happens in clinical practice for several disease states can be digitized, and for certain conditions we go to emergency room or call doctor at night just because we don't have enough knowledge. But what if that knowledge came to your fingertips and that spectrum will take place, there's no doubt about it, in next 3 to 5 years.
So thank you, Paritosh. I think thanks for the very insightful discussion. I think you answered some of the very pertinent, solve some of the most challenging problems we are facing in the industry today. So thank you, Paritosh, and over to you for the concluding remarks.
Yeah, I mean, so I think what I wanted to sort of with three constituents, right? With countries that want to drive innovation, bring in efficiency in the system, with large hospitals and startup ecosystem, and any platform for the world has to cater to these different constituencies, as regional problem statements are going to be different, and they're going to be will solve some problems but not all problems. So we are very conscious of that fact, and we are developing the platform in a flexible manner. Another thing that, as I mentioned, it needs to work very close to the device, very close to physician, and it needs to work on their data center as well as on cloud, so they can watch the patient state on their mobile phone, right? Doing that, cloud becomes several decades of innovation and exposed it to the key partners that I spoke about that will be hosted on this platform. And we are looking forward to opportunity, right, in next 6 months or so. So we are rapidly growing, and this platform is being deployed in the field, and the startup community already mentioned about, close to 50 is to partner and grow the platform even more. Thank you.
Well, welcome to New Horizon by Moneycontrol and CNBC TV 18, presented by GE. This is first is Captain G.R. Gopinath, who's the founder of Air Deccan, and we have Amit Singh, who's the founder of Safety Matters. Gentlemen, many thanks for joining us here and taking part in this very special discussion about sustainable aviation and whether India is prepared for it. Sir, many thanks for joining us. In 40 airlines who have committed towards sustainable aviation goals. There are different airlines working on sustainable aviation fuel. So what is your sense about the global preparedness about sustainable aviation, and where does India stand in the industry?
Giant steps in solar energy. But I think as far as aviation is concerned, we need to shift our focus even in that sector. As most of us may know, that when you talk of aviation, carbon, emissions that the aviation contributes, rather the aviation sector which contributes to that pollution in emissions of the world, the entire carbon emissions of the world, aviation is only 2.2. But still, it has got a larger proportionate impact on the environment. The pollutants and the forced emissions that it makes causes a greater amount of damage. And therefore, I think it is very, very critical for the and I think not much effort has gone there. I think it's time we get into that thing. Just to add a few more sentences, I'm not a scientist, but one is a bigger impact, because one man flies or two people fly in a large aircraft. In an airline, the per capita emission is much lesser, but the aircraft itself is very large. Unlike some countries like Brazil, India has not moved much in using biofuel in aircrafts, and the electrical aircrafts are, biofuel becomes much more efficient and much more larger usage. There will be emissions and there will be pollution. So there are a lot of things that airlines themselves can do in terms of their operating procedures, where the fuel usage, fuel wastage, and the way the aircraft is flown, the way aircraft is landed. If all that is taken into account, we once, when oil prices had touched $147 to almost $150, I think it's now, which is $75. We had done a study because it had become 55% of an air ticket. And from the time the pilot gets to signal to start the engine to take off, and also there needs to be a good coordination between the airport authority and the gates, and they're on the tarmac for 1 hour without getting permission to take off. So all these things, add to the reduction of fuel burn. Not only is it ecologically sound, it is economically sound, because when you reduce the fuel burn, the cost of the running an airline significantly reduces.
Community, how can we champion this in this stage, and how will the transition happen, and what are the kind of challenges and collaboration that will need to take place to achieve this goal?
Management of the airlines who are responsible for reduction of carbon emission, but everybody, even the ATC officer who is in charge on an airport, I am adding to my contribution towards reduction of greenhouse gases. A pilot who goes out of the or expedites his arrival safely is also contributing. So not just ATC officers, pilots, but it has to include every industry which contributes, not just aviation. As I've said, agriculture, we have to produce, and we have to collect the feedstock for production of the road or mass transportation through railways. So everybody contributes. It is not just aviation fuel. So aviation fuel comes normally to the ports, a standalone industry. There are many offshoots or links to this. So a long-term roadmap needs to be drawn for a combined industry, that the next generation which comes in is thinking not only about saving money, but saving the planet in terms of basically. So a roadmap has to look at the mind shift, not just a technological shift or a production shift or the capital outlay. So, my basic thought processes.
Another point here that I would like to focus on is that, as we say, that sustainable aviation fuel can reduce. Recently said that they are, targeting to fly 100 million passengers in India on sustainable aviation fuel by 2030. Well, that looks like an ambition. A flight from Dehradun to Delhi. They were experimenting with it. So, how serious are Indian airlines in terms of setting their
The first aspect is that we need innovation from the Indian scientists, the Indian fuel industry, which has to invest in R&D to reduce carbon emissions. That is one aspect. The other one is the innovations in electrical and solar flights, though it is small. I mean, they can carry 8 to 10 passengers. So work in that direction will yield results someday, as we have already seen in the solar energy, and incentives to develop that industry of the alternate fuels. But I think the airline, given the fact that whether the fuel is very high cost or very low cost, airlines can reduce the risks of the fact fuel burn will put a hole in their pocket and a hole in the environment. So they require to very diligently get after it by training the pilots, the aircrafts, start the engine and take off and land, in as minimum time of wastage as possible. These are the two aspects. But I think the third aspect, I think SpiceJet did something, but agencies and people being passionate about it and also working in concert. But I think there is also the other aspect of, simple things apart from the flying itself, the actual pilot flying and the engineer recording if you, which for example, the Kingfisher did, or if you load it with magazines, load it with too much of unnecessary water, unnecessary food as possible in the interiors, then all these things, will, for example, if you put a TV on each seat, the fuel burn will increase flying aspect. So the aspect of bringing down the weight of the aircraft is also as important. And the second point I want to make is it's not just about the airports, the travel to the airport. If there are something like 100,000 passengers, it can be in trains reaching the airport. So the aviation sector, have to extend it because there's pollution by all the people who are reaching the very, very, ecologically inimical job in creating the great carbon sink garden around the airport, converting the entire airport to solar, because it's very easy to convert an airport into solar because of the aviation sector. Whosoever works in it, because the airport is a large city. So there's no point, as you know, the largest contributor to carbon emissions is not just the aircraft, it is the airport, which in turn is a support sector for the airlines. I think so. You have to look at it in its entirety and not the narrow.
So just to focus on sustainable aviation fuel, even the R&D is currently quite expensive. So unless and until all the stakeholders come together and they framework which supports this entire process, then do you think it will be easier, and what kind of regulatory framework can come together for this sustainable aviation to finally get a kickstart?
And a carrot and a stick. There has to be, some kind of a disincentive. The government can take the initiative by bringing together a platform like the World Climate Change Forum. They should bring a platform within India of all the stakeholders. Challenge is that we are polluting ourselves to extinction. So the bringing together of also have to take an initiative. Though India is not manufacturing anything big, but the Airbus has already declared that they're going to become the government and even civil society, people who are in the forefront of environmental fight against the catering people. I think a whole lot, because if you as I said, every little thing matters. The aviation sector is a large sector. Because if you have huge pollution in reaching the airport as against using a train, for example, because the planet is a common planet, it's a common inheritance. And I think today the biggest danger to the planet itself, who are in the coastal areas, it will affect the farmers, it will affect everybody. We know it. It's no longer a theory. It is
that on one hand, we'll have to ensure that one part of the aviation sector, the core part, that is the airlines, they'll have to work on sustainable aviation. And on the other hand, there are different other stakeholders. Ensure the smooth transition from the current level of fossil fuels to biofuel. How do you think that can work out smoothly for the entire sector, because division sets in an aircraft? So in order to reduce all of that, in order to move to sustainability in a wholesome way, do you think the transition will be that smooth, or will it take?
What do you call the initiative that the Prime Minister took on Swachh Bharat, for example? It's a great initiative. India, I think after Gandhi, nobody paid as much attention to Swachh Bharat as Modi. But it's not enough to have the initiative, because this is a state subject in most of the cases. So it is required, on the one hand, those kind of initiatives, but on the other hand, execution is the key, and execution will not have metro connectivity to the airport. If you do not have excellent metro connectivity to the airport, airport of Noida, they should start the train network today, metro network today. And if you give, like in London or like in Japan, if you give a less number of people, the rich and poor will travel by train. And going by car must be prohibitive through entry tax, toll tax, so that easily take a car, one man traveling by car to the airport. That will not happen. So these kind of combinations, Earth, I think will work. Will always work, along with education and what we did in Swachh Bharat.
We're talking about airlines. What are the steps that the airlines options in their fleet? Because this is something of a challenge today. So how do you think that the airlines can have more sustainable options in their fleet?
Aviation sustainable fuel. And secondly, the cost. For example, typical cost as per a study from Amsterdam to New York, a $500 passenger, a 20-25% increase in the fare. So will it be acceptable or not? So how will the airline contribute to that? Now we have something called a retrofit. You can change the engines, or the new technology engines, better airframes, reducing the weight, using better lighter classes, that the airline can help in reducing the cost. And sustainable aviation fuel can be mixed 20%, 50%, but there has to be a beginning from somewhere so it is the whole system which has to contribute, and the airline is a part of it. Technology, artificial intelligence, and machine learning is helping every industry. So that is the future. Flight management systems and air traffic controllers, time-based arrivals and departures at airports, so that there is minimal wastage of fuel holding on ground and in air. So it is the intelligent use of technology. So if the airline to help in reducing the emissions, using sustainable fuel in the ground transportation. So the airlines have a lot to play in that, the ground transportation, in terms of so all these use the fossil fuel, so they have to change over to sustainable. So these are the areas which can be easily switched without much effort. So that is in all the airports in India. So the first move is to introduce sustainable fuel in those vehicles, which is the easier part to do. And that also contributes, because that comes under aviation. And how do you reach a lot of land with the airports? Like the railways have done, all the land they have planted Jatropha, through which they will produce to power the entire airport, because they have a lot of land. So every airport has single runway or multiple runways. There's a lot of land. So how do you use that land in a more productive way? So we have to look at alternate ways. It is not just changing the engine technology. That is the simplest thing to do. But other tertiary areas, ancillary. So those also have to be. So the whole
that newer aircraft, newer kind of aircraft that are coming in, each stage has better fuel efficiency. So each aircraft comes with better outcome for the user. But the globe that is about the global airlines. When we look at in the domestic segment, now the Indian airlines are talking about getting electric aircraft, getting hybrid system in their operations in the days to come. So do you think that India is still lacking at sustainability in Indian aviation after a significant period of time, and maybe not in the short to medium term? What are your thoughts on that?
So as I said, not just Indian aviation, I think even Indian aviation is behind turbine fuel, the aviation jet fuel. And globally, there has not been much progress, tremendous progress abroad in creating electrical aeroplanes. But that is not for the airlines. It is for individual small aircrafts. The authorities, FAA, approvals are waited. But those aircrafts are all small. They're all 4-seaters, 6-seaters. Building no effort made in India in that front. I think because we lack that aviation infrastructure in India. There's only one, which is HAL, which is a defense thing, and even HAL. So we need to invest now in creating technologies by local startups, which the government has encouraged. But it is a very an Airbus and Embraer, which is Brazil, and the Bombardier, which is Canadian. They know the company in the large air rich. So we are not there. China is manufactures of 100-seater aircraft, but not globally sold. Russia is manufactured 150, 180-seater aircraft. China is also manufactured 180-seater aircraft, but they're not globally sold. That is a larger vision, much in the future. But now we must do what we must do and what we can do. Yeah.
So, as the founder of Air Deccan, and you are an industry expert, what are the advantages of adopting sustainable aviation? For example, if you are the lead of an airline, you founded Air Deccan. So, as the aviation in India,
I think it is obvious to even a layman that if you destroy the environment, if you destroy your soil, if you destroy your forests, I think if you are ecologically sound, then you're economically sustainable. Because if it is not in the airline sector, it is very obvious. The biggest burn is your fuel. So pending by, for example, it's air conditioning. If you build eco-friendly buildings, having technology to see that you don't burn air conditioning, flying the plane correctly, and it requires good scientific audit, aviation audit as well as ecological audit. It will bring down your fuel burn, and if it brings down your fuel burn, today 20% of your ticket, and so bringing down your fuel cost will straight away bring down your cost of running the airline. It is as simple as that. You don't have to be aviation, Sherlock Holmes to understand that.
Sustainable.
Yeah, so everything starts from a mindset. So it is not the policymakers or the top management of the airlines has to have that thinking that if I reduce the track miles of an aircraft, or if I reduce the holding pattern on an airport, goes out of the way for track reduction, for asking for direct routings or expedited thinking, a mindset. So when we have a roadmap, a long-term plan, it has to include every industry which contributes, not just aviation. As I've said, agriculture, we have to produce. So transportation can be done through the road or mass transportation through railways. So everybody contributes. It is not just aviation fuel. So aviation fuel comes normally to the ports or from the loan industry. There are many offshoots or links to this. So a long-term roadmap needs to be drawn for a combined industry level thought process, which comes in is thinking not only about saving money, but saving the planet in terms of energy conservation or reduction, not just a technological shift or a production shift or the capital outlay. So it is basically a generational thinking mind shift. So that is what we have the whole talk.
We were talking about innovation in sustainable aviation, and do you think that there is dearth of universities which are solely focused on research in aviation in India?
Yeah, I think we got the Indian Institute of Science, some engineering colleges, they have got a division for aeronautical engineering. But and of course you have environmental activists, environmental scientists. But I think the interface between research and industry, and across all sectors in India is lacking. If you see anything that, any of the bioengineering equipment that you use, or a laser that you use for eye surgery, it is all invented in the West, because some scientist invents the laser, and then there's either correct your eyesight, or a surgeon for blasting your kidney stones. So this kind of interface between institution, research, and industry, we need institutions which get into research on aviation fuel, because the fuel that you use, aviation turbine fuel, that is specific to grants for those researchers from the government. If some university wants to take it up, the government must give the grant to encourage it. So I think that is very, very vital, because our percentage of investment in China. So we need to invest heavily on research, and then interface between research and industry, and research and aviation. Right?
That's right, sir. So as you point for adopting sustainable aviation, but still there is a regulatory framework, some kind of unanimous work that has to be put together by the airlines and other stakeholders to finally get sustainable aviation in India.
Day one of the New Horizon Summit. We certainly hope you found the sessions insightful, lot of rich perspective on how technology can have a huge impact on vital sectors such as healthcare and aviation. But GE CEO Larry Culp, in conversation with CNBC TV 18's managing editor Shireen Ban, the Union Minister for Environment, Forests and Climate Change, Mr. Bhupender Yadav, will also be there on day two of the New Horizon. Follow us on